Hello, fifth grade. Welcome to History with Mrs. Ritter. Oh. Just a little recap. Remember, we learned first about President Andrew Jackson, and he was a controversial president because he did some things that not a lot of people liked. But he was known as like a president for the common man because he wasn't like a super fancy politician, like, uppity and rich. He, was educated himself and, he was more like the common man. So some of the things, remember, he was the general that at the War of 1812, he heard that the president said, okay, the war's over, time to stop. And he continued to fight the British, and the British had 2,000 casualties because of that down in New Orleans. Well, anyway, he became president, and he did a few things that people weren't super excited about. Remember, there's the bank issue about withdrawing, the funds from a national bank and kind of supporting more of the local banks. So it ended up not being a good thing, really, because a lot of money was lost. Also, he had issues with the southern states because he put a big tax on imports, which means, if the southern states had to get a lot of their goods and stuff from other places, so they technically had to import their goods. And if you put a tax on that, that means they have to pay more. So they weren't happy about that, and the southern states were really mad. They had thoughts about leaving the Union, which means leaving the United States, and saying, we want to be different, right, or separate. So there were some issues there. And then, of course, the issue over the Native Americans and how he gave them money, yes, but sent them on the Trail of Tears, which led them to, like reservations in Oklahoma and stuff like that. But it was just a horrible time for the Native Americans. And I think most Americans would say that it was something that, shouldn't have happened. So that's Andrew Jackson. So controversial president. Okay. And then the lesson after that was about moving west. So you heard about all the different trails, like the Oregon Trail and the Mormon Trail, and the different people that moved out west. A lot of it was for religious purposes. A lot of it was for, starting new, wanting more land, cheaper land. But just, it was a reminder that it wasn't easy. And then at the end, here for your sports loving people, the 49ers, the NFL team, the 49ers, think about the fact that, hey, the 49ers are known as the 49ers because of where they live. So, gold was found in California. So people rushed over in, what year was that? 1849 to go look for gold. So that's where the 49ers name got its name from, because the 49ers live in that area in California. So anyway, so the 49ers, people started rushing towards the West Coast to see if they could strike it rich. But honestly, most people didn't. So it's a very interesting time in history. Just moving out west. Very hard, very rugged, very on their own. And back then, they didn't have, fancy vaccines or things that could help our bodies, like, when we get sick, or there was a lot of disease that went on, and people died while they were trying to get out west and trying to survive. So I do thank God that we live here in this time with the different necessities that we have. So, but it is fun to learn about history and to see how far we've come. So here we go. This is lesson 4, Texas and the War with Mexico. So I'm going to read this to you, chat a little bit with you, and then if you could answer some questions afterwards, there's a Google Doc connected to this assignment on Google Classroom. So just answer the questions, and It should be good. All right. Okay, so here we go. Texas and the War with Mexico. This is page 392 in your history book. I think I derived or got more satisfaction from the view of flourishing farms springing up in the wilderness than military or political chieftains do from the retrospect memory of their victorious campaigns. My object is to build up for the present as well as future generations. Stephen Austin wrote these words as he thought back on his early years in Texas. And we'll find out who Stephen Austin is in just a little bit. All right. Texas and Mexico. For years, Spaniards in Mexico heard stories of the great kingdom of the Tejas. In the stories, Native American people called the Caddo referred to themselves as Teyas or friends. As a result, the Spanish called the entire region Texas. Under Spain, Texas was included in the colony of Mexico. After 10 years of war, Mexico won its independence from Spain in 1821. Texas then became part of the new Mexican Republic. Mexican leaders worried because few people lived in Texas. Mexicans also feared that the United States would settle Texas. Mexico's rulers offered land to Mexicans to encourage settlement in Texas. All right, so that makes sense. If you think about it, Mexico finally got ownership of Texas from Spain because Spain had it. And they were worried that since it was, next to a lot of what the United States has already, gotten from land and agreements and stuff, Mexico is worried that, people from the United States are going to go settle there. But that's Mexico's land, not the United States. So they're trying to get their Mexican, citizens to go live in Texas. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on. So the Mexican Republic was the, new country that Texas became a part of in 1821. Okay, gone to Texas. Here we go. Mexico gave Missouri merchant Moses Austin permission to bring American settlers to Texas in 1821 if they agreed to become Mexican citizens. Okay, so that's already the tricky thing here, right? He said, okay, bring over Americans, but they have to say that they're going to be Mexican citizens. Okay, well, Austin died, and his son Stephen F. Austin completed his plan in 1822. He brought about 300 families to Texas. These settlers came to be known as the Old 300. In the 1820s and 1830s, land in Texas was cheaper than land in the United States. In fact, it was often free. Texas fever soon swept the United States. Mary Austin Holly, an American, was impressed by the Texas soil. In 1831, she wrote, The newcomer has but to plant his seeds in the ground, and the increase is astonishing. So here's the issue. They brought over 300 Americans, right, from the United States. And now, hearing all about it, saying, oh, the Texas land is free. Well, now tons of people are going to come over, of course. So now you've got tons of American citizens wanting to come into Texas, but it doesn't belong to the United States. It belongs to Mexico. So you can see there's already going to be issues coming up here. Sources of conflict. Well, slavery was illegal under Mexican law, but Mexican leaders allowed slavery in Texas to encourage American immigration. Even so, the Mexican government required settlers in Texas to become Mexican citizens, join the Roman Catholic Church, and learn Spanish. However, most Americans did not learn Spanish or change their religion. They also ignored the laws because the government of Mexico was too far away to enforce them. Okay, so do you see all the issues? So they're supposed to come, become Mexican citizens. They're supposed to change their religion to Catholic, and they're supposed to learn Spanish. But all the Americans that came over, or most of them, didn't do any of that. So we see kind of issues coming up. So if you see the question, what were the problems between the Mexican government and the American settlers? The Americans weren't doing what I guess they said they would if they settled there. Well, conflict leads to war, people. So here we go. It says, Mexico's leaders began to worry that they would lose Texas. By 1830, Americans in Texas outnumbered Mexican residents, or Tejanos, by 3-1. Mexican leaders decided to stop immigration from the United States. This decision angered many Americans living in Texas. Mexico outlawed slavery in Texas in 1829. Many planters complained that they could not grow cotton without slave labor. A planter named John Durst wrote to Stephen F. Austin, "We are ruined forever." In 1833, a number of Texans asked Austin to go to Mexico City to explain why Texans were against the new laws. They hoped that the Mexican government would agree to make Texas a separate Mexican state, but instead, Austin was arrested for trying to start a rebellion and was put in jail for more than a year. So, it doesn't look like Stephen F. Austin helped out very much, huh? So, the effect of him trying to go to Mexico City to talk to the government, he was put in jail. So that stinks. All right, moving on. Texas revolts. Mexico's president, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, sent about 1,400 Mexican troops into Texas in 1835. Santa Anna had seized power in Mexico the year before. He had thrown out Mexico's constitution and made himself president for life. Now Santa Anna planned to end the arguments with Texas. So he sounds like a dictator, which means he does his own thing and he's the powerful leader that doesn't listen to anyone. And as you can see, he throws out the Constitution and he makes himself president for life. So that's a little interesting. So starting here, Santa Anna was disliked by many Texans, Tejanos and Americans alike. They opposed his takeover of the Mexican government, and they joined together to fight Santa Anna's troops. A Tejano leader, Juan Seguin, organized volunteers into a Texas army. Volunteers arrived from the United States. David Crockett, a former United States congressman from Tennessee, joined the fight. Jim Bowie, also from Tennessee, led a volunteer force. William Travis, a lawyer from Alabama, had been appointed commander of the Texas Army. All right, so we're getting Texas, the Americans in Texas are starting to stand up to Santa Anna and the Mexican government, I suppose. So let's see what happens. This is called Remember the Alamo. That's what this picture on page 395 is all about. The Texas Army took control of the Alamo, a Spanish mission. Now remember, a mission is like a village almost, where they try to convert like Native Americans and people from the area to the Catholic religion, and there's places for them to learn, places for them to work. So that's what this was, a Spanish mission called the Alamo. And it was in San Antonio, and that was changed into a fort. Between 187 and 257 Texas rebels, wives and children, were camped inside. More than 4,000 of Santa Anna's troops surrounded the fort. On February 23rd, 1836, the Mexican troops attacked the Alamo. After almost 2 weeks of fighting, 2 weeks, people, those people and wives and children are in that mission. 2 weeks of fighting. It's really sad. After 2 weeks, the Mexican soldiers broke through their defense on March 6th. In hand-to-hand fighting, most of the Alamo's defenders were killed. More than 1,000 Mexican soldiers died as well. Alamo survivors were mostly women and children, met Santa Anna. He ordered Susanna Dickinson, whose husband was one of the dead, to carry the news of the Texans' defeat. She took a letter from Santa Anna to the headquarters of Sam Houston. Houston, born in Virginia, was a general in the Texas Army. During the Battle of the Alamo, 59 Texas delegates met in Washington on the Brazos and approved a Declaration of Independence on March 2nd, 1836. It proclaimed the new Republic of Texas. The outnumbered Texas Army was defeated on March 19th. More than 350 prisoners were marched to a fort at Goliad. Against the advice of his officers, Santa Anna had all the prisoners executed. This act shocked Texas. So, sadness. So, during the Battle of the Alamo, off and away, these Texas delegates were in Washington on the Brazos. They were trying to get a declaration to say, you know what, we're going to be independent from Mexico, trying to get away from this crazy dictator, Santa Anna. And after the Texas Army, so after this Alamo, the Texas Army that they had set up, it says that the Texas Army was defeated, and the prisoners that Santa Anna took from that, 350 prisoners, he killed them all. So I think that would shock anybody. So here we go. Here's this: Texas becomes independent. In April, Houston's troops surprised Santa Anna near San Jacinto River, shouting, "Remember the Alamo and remember Goliad." The Texans defeated the Mexican army on April 21st. The battle was over in 18 minutes. Santa Anna was captured. He agreed to ask Mexico to grant independence to Texas in exchange for his freedom. Ooh, that's a rough one. Let's see what happens. Statehood and war. This is page 396. Sam Houston was elected the first president of the Republic of Texas. Lorenzo de Salvala, a Tejano officer, became the first vice president. The Texans chose a flag with a single white star. The young republic was nicknamed the Lone Star Republic. Its capital was Houston. In 1836, Sam Houston asked President Andrew Jackson to make the Republic of Texas a state. Mexico threatened to go to war if Texas became a state. Jackson knew that Texas would allow slavery. He did not want to lose the support of Northern leaders who opposed slavery, so Jackson turned down Houston's request. So Sam Houston, who was the first president of Texas, he's like, hey, can we become part of the United States? But Andrew Jackson, who was president at the time of the United States, was worried about the whole slavery thing. So he said no. But then here it says, by 1844, political leaders had changed their minds. James K. Polk promised the American people all of Texas and was elected president. Texas entered the Union in 1845. So the next president, James K. Polk, allowed Texas to come into the United States and be a state. Okay? Well, Mexico did say, we're going to go to war if Texas becomes a United States state. And so here we go. In 1845, President Polk sent an official to Mexico to settle the border dispute between Texas and Mexico at the Rio Grande. He also offered to buy the Mexican territories of California and New Mexico for $30 million. Mexico angrily refused the offer. President Polk ordered General Zachary Taylor and his troops in Texas to march to the Rio Grande in April of 1846. They made it across the Rio Grande and captured several Mexican cities. Taylor's forces defeated Santa Anna's army at the Battle of Buena Vista in 1847. The war spread quickly. California was part of Mexico at the time, but Americans there declared an independent republic called the Bear Flag Republic, in June of 1846. The United States Navy arrived soon after and claimed California. At the same time, Stephen Kearny and his troops captured New Mexico's capital at Santa Fe. They then marched to California. After several battles, Mexico's troops surrendered in January of 1847. So pretty much the Americans kind of, I guess you would say, bullied these Mexican territories, California, New Mexico. They kind of with their military, they bullied them into kind of giving them up and making them part of the United States. So that's the whole idea. Sorry, shaken. By force. So that's, yeah, pretty much how that all happened. And if you look at the dates, 1847, that's when our old church was built at St. Peter's. The first school and church. Isn't that amazing? So while we were getting settled in Schaumburg, our church and everything in school, Texas and California and New Mexico were on the verge of becoming part of the United States. Isn't that crazy? So cool. All right, let's finish this. The war ends, page 398. An American army led by General Winfield Scott landed on the coast of Mexico in 1847 and headed inland toward Mexico City. The fortress guarding the Mexican capital was called Chapultepec. Scott's troops attacked the fortress in September 1847. Inside were fewer than 1,100 Mexican troops, including Los Niños, a group of young military cadets. After a fierce battle, Americans captured the fortress. In 1848, the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the war. Mexico accepted the Rio Grande as its border with Texas. Mexico also gave up half of its territory to the United States, which agreed to pay $15 million to Mexico for the lands shown on the map above. All right, so after this, the purple we got because of the agreement. So Mexican land awarded to the United States under the treaty. In 1853, we purchased the orange part of Arizona. And then in the green section was all the stuff that happened before with Texas and I guess part of New Mexico, with the whole Alamo thing and when we got to be our own republic and then, yeah, all that stuff. So see, the United States now gained all of this land, all the colorful land. So we're learning how we finally got pretty much all of this land here. Okay. All right. The 80,000 Mexicans living in Mexico's former lands had to choose between Mexican and American citizenship. Only 2,000 chose to remain Mexican. The new citizens were guaranteed the same rights as any other Americans, yet many of them lost their land because they were unfamiliar with the English language and with the American courts of law. So if they were Mexicans living in these lands before, they had to choose whether they were going to be Mexican or American. And some of those that chose to turn, to be American just had a hard time because of the language. All right, here we go, almost done. A new idea. Jane Casnew was a journalist who wrote an editorial about Texas in 1845. She was the first person to state the idea that it was the manifest destiny of the United States to occupy land from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Manifest destiny was a belief in the right of the United States to expand its borders and to claim new lands. This belief continued to play a key role in the settlement of Western lands. And that's a picture of Zachary Taylor, one of the presidents. The United States, putting it together. The United States gained a vast territory as a result of the Mexican War. General Zachary Taylor used his fame as a commander in the Mexican War to help him become the 12th president of the United States in 1849. The officers of the United States Army who fought in the war gained valuable battlefield experience. In less than 20 years, these same veterans would be fighting again, often against each other, on United States soil. All right, dear ones. So there'll be a few questions for you to answer. Please go on Google Classroom and look for the Google Doc. You can just type in the answers right then and there. And use your page numbers if you need to look back or watch the video, because the video pretty much has all the words too. So starting on page 392 and it goes to 399, okay? We are heading, after this lesson, we're heading into the Civil War. So that's going to be our next topic for history. So I'll see you soon.